In the vast alien council chamber, a glow of pale blue light spread across the curved walls as the great screen at the center began to flicker into life. The darkness of space outside was forgotten as I turned to the shimmering display. The screen opened with scenes of fire and smoke, cities falling apart, skies split with thunder of bombs, and endless war. The silence of the chamber soon filled with murmurs as the alien delegates leaned forward, their scaled faces and shining eyes reflecting the flames that danced on the screen. They whispered among themselves with fascination, as if staring at a strange creature they had never known. The images moved quickly, armies clashing across muddy trenches, cannons roaring, tanks grinding forward under blackened skies, soldiers crawling through ruined streets, their faces coated in ash, their eyes hardened with fear and fury. The aliens murmured in surprise at the chaos before them. One leaned to another and whispered, "Look at them, so primitive, so desperate." Another hissed with laughter, "Such savagery, yet so disorganized." The screen shifted, showing mushroom clouds rising with dreadful power, entire cities consumed by blinding light. The aliens let out a chorus of shock and then mocking laughter. The chamber filled with voices as one said, "These creatures burn their own world." Another replied, "They destroy each other without hesitation." A third shook his scaled head and laughed. Even the smallest clans of the Outer Rim would crush them easily. More footage rolled by rivers of soldiers storming beaches, waves of fire cutting through forests, steel birds falling from the sky like burning meteors, tanks exploding in thunderous flames, men and women running through chaos, yet still advancing into death. The aliens leaned forward, more curious, their eyes wide with both horror and amusement. They spoke again. "Look how they fight, with no grace, no strategy, only blind rage and endless violence." At the far edge of the chamber, half hidden in shadows, sat one figure unlike the rest, his form smaller, more fragile than the towering aliens around him, his uniform simple, his face aged by time, his eyes fixed upon the screen, but not with curiosity, not with laughter, instead with quiet memory. He was a human, a veteran brought here as little more than a curiosity, a token to be studied or mocked. He remained silent while the aliens laughed, but inside him a storm was rising. His gaze hardened as he recognized the battles on the screen, not just stories, not just images, but memories carved into his very soul. He saw the beaches where comrades fell, he saw the ruins where fire swallowed everything. He saw faces he could never forget, men shouting orders, friends screaming in pain, hands reaching for help that never came. He sat there in silence, but his heart burned. The aliens continued their mockery, their voices echoing across the chamber. One said their history is nothing but fire. Another added their strength is weakness, their bravery is madness. A third slammed his claw against the table and declared, "This world is chaos, only destruction holds them together." The human veteran closed his eyes for a moment, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The sounds of the footage blended with echoes of his memory. Gunfire, screams, the pounding of his own heart. In those endless nights of survival, he had lived through hell, and though he bore scars both seen and unseen, he had endured. He had witnessed the unbreakable will of humanity, a will the aliens could never understand. The chamber lights shifted again as the footage moved forward, showing great ships at sea, battles in deserts, men fighting with nothing but determination against impossible odds. The aliens shook their heads, their laughter never ending, their voices dripping with scorn. One said, "This is nothing compared to the wars of the Zalith or the sea." Another barked a cruel laugh. "They fight like animals with teeth and nails, no strategy, no discipline." Through it all the human remained quiet, his mind trapped between the present and the past, his body still in the chamber, but his spirit back in those burning fields of battle. He saw faces of comrades standing shoulder to shoulder against storms of fire. He saw ordinary men and women who refused to yield, even when their world seemed certain to end. He remembered the moment when hope was nothing but ash, yet humans still pressed forward, never surrendering, never breaking. The aliens were blind to this truth. They saw only destruction, only madness. They could not see the courage that rose from the ashes, the spirit that thrived in chaos, the will that refused to die. One alien leaned back and spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "This species could never stand against us. Their fractured weak, obsessed with violence, they would fall within hours against true warriors. The human veteran's eyes snapped open, his fist slowly tightening, his knuckles white with pressure. The laughter of the aliens echoed through the chamber, but his silence was heavier than their noise. He stared at the screen, where fire raged across human soil, and he clenched his hand tighter. His heartbeat thundered like drums of war. He remembered his brothers, his sisters, the ones who stood beside him in mud and fire. He remembered their sacrifice. He remembered their strength. The alien commander raised his voice again, mocking and cruel. This species is broken and fragile. There is no unity, no purpose. They are but shadows in the fire, nothing more. The human veteran said nothing, yet his silence carried the weight of storms. He sat with eyes sharp as steel, his jaw firm, his body tense. He knew the truth of what they mocked. He knew the strength hidden behind the chaos. He knew the resilience forged in fire. He knew that every drop of blood shed on Earth told a story not of weakness, but of endurance, of survival, of will unshaken. The alien commander smirked, looking at the screen with disdain, his words cutting through the chamber with arrogance. This species could never stand against us. In that moment, the chamber filled with the sound of laughter once more, but the human veteran did not laugh. His fist clenched tight, his heart steady, his eyes burning with the fire of memory and the promise of something greater. The aliens did not notice the storm rising in the silence. They did not notice the warning hidden in the hardened gaze of the lone human. And there the first shadow of dread began to fall. The alien council chamber remained alive with cruel laughter, the mocking voices of commanders and envoys rolling like waves across the grand hall. Yet in one corner the lone human veteran sat, unmoving, his eyes unblinking, as he studied the endless flames on the screen, the sounds of burning cities and shattering earth echoing in his memory like ghosts returning from the past. Though the alien saw chaos, he saw stories of sacrifice, each fire, each scream, each broken ruin etched into him like scars on flesh. The council leader rose, his frame tall and covered in glimmering scales, his voice harsh as he spoke. This is the history of a doomed people, 100 cycles of endless fighting, yet no progress, no unity. Their weakness is clear. They are violent to themselves. How could such a fractured race ever resist the strength of the stars? The others shouted in agreement, voices rising higher, their words like knives slicing away any respect for humankind. In the shadows, the human veteran shifted slightly, his hand brushing against the fabric of his old uniform. Though worn with age, the fabric still carried weight. It was not only cloth, it was memory, it was blood. And while it was every battle he had survived, he thought of those who once marched beside him, and he remembered their courage, the courage unseen by the aliens who mocked them from above. The screen changed once again, now showing wars from later centuries, steel machines rolling across deserts, endless fleets clashing in ocean skies, burning with fire from jet engines, missiles tearing across black clouds. The aliens leaned closer, their laughter softening into something more curious. One muttered they grew stronger, but never wiser. Another added their technology improved, yet still they kill each other with no end. A smaller alien envoy sneered they waste every resource, every chance at peace. They deserve to fall before the order of the stars. The human veteran breathed slowly, his chest rising with quiet power. His memories refused to fade. The screams of the battlefield filled his mind. Yet within those screams, he heard something else, the courage of voices shouting orders through fire, the promise of men refusing to let go, the cries of determination that rose louder than despair. He remembered one night when he and his brothers stood in darkness, surrounded by enemies certain of death. Yet none retreated, none begged, none broke. They fought until the dawn lit the sky with fire, and still they held their ground. He looked back at the screen, his lips pressed into a hard line. The aliens could not see what he saw. To them, these battles were meaningless struggles of primitive animals, but to him, they were proof of something far greater. The chamber grew restless as the footage reached moments of near total destruction, entire nations collapsing, cities swallowed by clouds of fire and ash. One commander hissed with amusement, "They almost ended themselves without our help." Another snapped his claws together as he laughed. Imagine such power wasted upon minds so small. A new voice rang out across the hall, low and cold. It came from High Commander, who sat at the far end, his armor glimmering with strange light, his eyes narrow with contempt. "This is not a warrior species. This is a swarm of beasts, and they should be dealt with as such. We will wipe them from the stars before they even realize they are prey." The human veteran turned his gaze toward that voice, his expression never changing, yet his silence heavy like a storm. The aliens ignored him to them. He was nothing more than a fragile specimen, barely worth acknowledgement, yet in his stillness there was a weight, an unspoken defiance. The footage shifted again, now showing moments where humans not only fought, but endured through hunger, through fire, through despair. They rebuilt cities shattered by bombs. They stood again. After losing everything, they formed lines of steel when death seemed certain, and still they advanced. The aliens muttered among themselves, confused by the stubborn repetition of survival. One asked, "Why do they rise again when all is lost?" Another hissed, "Because they are too foolish to quit." The human veteran's eyes sharpened. He knew it was not foolishness. It was the heart of humanity, a fire that never died, a will that refused to break. He remembered faces covered in dirt, yet still smiling, voices trembling, yet still singing, hands bleeding, yet still reaching forward. He knew the truth, and he held it silently within him. The council leader slammed his claw upon the table to silence the murmurs, his voice booming enough of this spectacle. "We see what we needed to see. Humans are weak. Their history is proof of failure. They are a violent mistake that must be erased." The chamber roared with agreement, the alien voices growing louder and louder, their chants filled with arrogance and pride. They believed they had seen everything. They believed they understood Earth. They believed conquest would be simple, inevitable, swift. Yet at the edge of the room, the human veteran leaned forward, his hands resting together, his eyes locked upon the screen that still flickered with fire. He whispered to himself, words too quiet for others to hear, but heavy with meaning. "You do not understand. You never will." The screen darkened, the chamber lights grew brighter. The council prepared for their next steps, voices discussing invasion dates, fleets, mobilization, weapons, and strategies, each word dripping with arrogance. They saw themselves as hunters and humans as prey. But the human veteran sat there, his silence masking the storm that grew within him. He remembered every sacrifice, every last stand, every impossible victory carved into the bones of humanity. He knew something the aliens could not grasp. They thought violence made humans weak, but it made them strong. They thought chaos broke them, but chaos forged them. They thought destruction ended them, but destruction only tempered them. The chamber echoed with the alien commander's voice, final and sharp. "This species could never stand against us. They are shadows lost in their own fire. They will fall." And as those words cut through the hall, the human veteran's fist closed, once more, veins rising against his skin, his eyes burning like embers from the very battles they mocked. He lifted his head, the silence of his body more powerful than the noise of 100 alien voices. He stared at the towering commander with a gaze that carried centuries of pain and unbroken will. The aliens did not see it yet, but in that gaze lay the promise of reckoning, the promise that history was not weakness, but warning, the promise that what they mocked would one day rise against them. The chamber rang with arrogance, but within the silence of one man sat the weight of every war, every sacrifice, every flame of humanity waiting to burn brighter than the stars. And the storm had only begun. The alien council chamber slowly emptied, yet the weight of their words remained heavy in the air, their arrogant laughter echoing through the high ceilings like the sound of iron striking stone. Though the great hall dimmed, the human veteran did not move, his eyes still locked on the screen now gone dark. But the flames still burned within his memory, every fire, every cry, every shadow of sacrifice alive once more inside him. Beyond the walls of the council chamber, alien fleets hung in orbit around their world, colossal ships lined in endless formation, each bristling with weapons of unimaginable power. Commanders walked the decks with pride, speaking of Earth as if it were already ash, their voices confident, their tones sharp with superiority, yet they did not know the truth of what awaited them on that distant blue world, for Earth was not simply a planet of chaos. It was a forge where strength was born through struggle. Back within the chamber, a small group of younger alien officers lingered, whispering among themselves. One of them, a tall, thin figure with piercing silver eyes, pointed at the silent human with curiosity and scorn. "Why is he here? What purpose does it serve to bring such a fragile being into our council? Another officer laughed. Perhaps he is here to remind us of what we conquer, to see the despair of a lesser race before they vanish the group. Chuckled, but the human veteran did not react. He remained as stone, though inside his thoughts moved like storms. He remembered moments that could never be erased, like the time he crawled through mud while fire rained from the skies, and yet still he carried the wounded on his back, refusing to let them fall. He remembered when his comrades stood against steel machines greater than mountains, yet they did not retreat. They fought until their last breath, and in doing so they showed the world what it meant to endure. He remembered the faces of those who never came home, and he carried their memory like a weapon, sharper than any blade. The young alien officers turned back to their commander, reporting that Earth was divided, weak, and unprepared. They listed numbers of battles lost and victories that came with ruin. They argued that such a species could not resist the strength of their fleets, their confidence unshaken by what they had seen. But the human veteran knew the truth, for behind every broken city, there was always a rebuilt one. Behind every fall, there was always a rise. Behind every defeat, there was always the seed of a greater victory. The chamber lights dimmed again as the council leader returned, calling for one final display of Earth's history. The screen flickered once more, this time showing a moment when humans stood not divided, but united across nations and oceans, across language and belief. They fought together against a threat greater than themselves. The footage showed fleets, rising skies, filled with wings of steel, soldiers marching side by side, their faces grim yet unbroken. The aliens murmured with confusion, some tilted their heads, unsure of what they were seeing. One whispered, "How could such a violent people stand together?" Another answered, "It must have been luck, nothing more." The human veteran's heart tightened as he watched. He remembered being there. He remembered the sound of countless voices rising as one, the thunder of steps, the echo of unity. He remembered how fear turned into fire, how weakness turned into will, and how even in the face of overwhelming darkness, they fought as one. He knew that was the heart of humanity, something no alien voice could erase. The High Commander slammed his fist against the table, dismissing the moment as chance, his voice sharp. "These humans are animals that sometimes stumble into order. Their unity is an illusion, their strength a myth. We will crush them before they ever rise again." The others roared in agreement, voices rising like storm winds, but the human veteran sat calm, though his silence carried a weight heavier than any roar. As the meeting closed, the alien envoys left one by one, speaking of fleets and invasions, their confidence filling the air. Like poison outside the chamber, stars stretched endlessly across the void, where ships awaited their commands, each vessel forged for war, each weapon polished for conquest. They believed Earth was already theirs, yet in their arrogance they did not see the fire that waited to meet them. The human veteran slowly rose from his seat, his steps quiet as he walked toward the exit. The aliens ignored him, their laughter still strong, their words dripping with pride. But as he moved, his mind burned with memory. He saw again the faces of his brothers, the moments of fire and courage, the endless sacrifices that built his world. He carried those with him like a shield, unbroken. Outside the chamber, he paused before a massive window that revealed the alien fleets, shining like silver blades against the darkness of space. They filled the sky, a sight meant to inspire fear. Yet he felt no fear, only resolve. His reflection stared back at him within the glass, and he saw not one man, but the weight of every warrior who had ever stood for Earth. He whispered words only for himself. "They do not know what waits for them. They do not know what we are." Behind him, a voice called out. It was one of the younger alien officers, curious about the silent human. He stepped closer, asking, "Why do you sit and say nothing when your people are mocked? Why do you watch as we speak of their fall?" The human veteran turned slowly, his eyes sharp like fire, though his voice calm. He answered with words measured. "They laugh because they do not understand, and what they do not understand will one day destroy them." The alien officer froze, unsettled by the quiet weight of those words. Though he tried to laugh it off, the echo of that voice lingered in his mind like a shadow that refused to fade. The human veteran turned away. Once more his steps steady, his presence like a storm hidden beneath calm seas. He knew the truth that history was not weakness, but warning that every fire burned brighter after darkness, and that when the time came, humanity would rise not as prey, but as something far more terrible to their enemies. And as the alien fleets prepared for conquest, as the Council prepared to unleash destruction, the Silent Man carried with him a truth sharper than any weapon of truth the aliens could not yet see, a truth that would strike when least expected. The storm was coming, and he was its first whisper. The human veteran walked the long metallic corridor that stretched beyond the council chamber, each step echoing faintly against walls lined with alien symbols of victory banners hung like scars across the cold steel, each telling the story of conquest worlds fallen beneath the weight of alien fleets, races bent into silent civilizations, erased into dust. And yet, as he walked, he felt no fear, only the familiar calm of a soldier who had already stood in fire and survived. At the end of the hall, 2 guards stood tall, their armor glimmering in pale light, their eyes fixed upon him with disdain. Though they held weapons carved for war, they saw only weakness in the quiet human, their lips curled in smirks. One muttered to the other, "This creature does not belong here. It is nothing but a relic dragged to witness the glory of its end." The other nodded. Yet both kept their distance, for there was something in the man's eyes, something that made even their arrogance tremble. The veteran passed them without a word, his gaze steady, his mind alive with memories. He remembered the trenches filled with mud and fire where men and women dug deep into the earth, refusing to yield. He remembered the skies painted with flame when bombs fell like rain, yet the cities still rose. He remembered the way hearts held firm when the world itself seemed broken, and he knew deep within him that these aliens, no matter their fleets, no matter their weapons, could never understand what lived inside the human spirit. Far above the alien homeworld, the fleet's prepared engines glowing like suns across the dark void. Commanders barked orders, voices carrying through steel corridors as weapons hummed with life. The vast armada stretched endlessly, row upon row, like an iron storm ready to descend upon Earth. Some laughed as they worked their arrogance loud. They called Earth a fragile blue rock, easy prey, an open door to glory. Yet in their laughter was blindness, for they saw numbers, but not while they measured strength. In ships, but not in hearts. Back on the surface, the council gathered once more, this time in secret chambers hidden deep beneath the city, their voices urgent, their tone sharp. They spoke of the invasion, not as a question, but as a promise. The time had come, they said. Earth must be broken, and bent the fleets were prepared, the soldiers ready. Their words struck the air like blades. But in the corner unseen, the human veteran listened, his silence heavy as stone, though no one noticed him. His ears caught every word. One alien elder raised a hand, silencing the chamber, his voice smooth yet edged like glass. He spoke of Earth as disease, a world of chaos needing to be cleansed. He claimed their violence was proof of weakness, that their endless wars showed no wisdom, only madness. He declared their victory would be swift, clean, absolute. The others nodded, their pride shining, yet the human veteran clenched his hand into a fist hidden at his side, for he knew their mistake. They mistook scars for weakness, when in truth, scars were the mark of survival. As the meeting ended, the human stepped away, his mind burning with fire. He knew the fleets would come soon, perhaps in days, perhaps in hours. He knew the skies of Earth would soon darken with shadows of alien steel. But he also knew something deeper, something the aliens could not understand, that every invasion of Earth in history, every attempt to crush it, had always failed, because Earth had a power no calculation could measure. It had the power to endure, to rise from ashes, to turn pain into strength, and in unity find unbreakable will. He walked out into the alien city. Towering spires of metal reached into the heavens, glowing with strange light. Ships moved above like predators, circling their prey. Voices of aliens filled the air, markets alive with strange tongues, laughter sharp with arrogance. They believed the coming invasion already won, but the human veteran moved through the streets with steady calm, his eyes catching every detail, every weakness, every opening. He saw their confidence, and he knew it was their greatest flaw. In the distance, a young alien child pointed at him, asking its mother, "What is that?" The mother sneered, "A relic, a lesser being soon to be gone." The child laughed, innocent, yet sharp words echoing like knives. Yet the human only gave a small nod and moved on, his silence unbroken, his resolve burning ever brighter. He knew such laughter would one day turn into cries when truth arrived. That night within the alien barracks, soldiers trained their bodies sharp, their weapons strong, their voices filled with pride. They spoke of crushing humans with ease. They mocked Earth, calling it a playground of fools. They boasted of victory before the first shot was even fired. Yet one among them, the young officer, who had earlier questioned the human, could not let go of his words. They echo in his mind, they laugh, because they do not understand, and what they do not understand will one day destroy. Then the young officer looked out the window at the stars and felt unease. Meanwhile, the human veteran stood alone on a balcony high above the city. The alien fleets glimmered above, endless and powerful. Yet in his heart, he remembered standing before fire greater than this. He remembered the roar of storms and the crushing weight of hopeless odds. He remembered how each time humanity refused to die, how each time they found a way through darkness. And he whispered to the night, "They do not know. They will learn soon." Suddenly alarms rang across the alien city, though not alarms of danger, but of readiness. Fleets shifting in a final formation, weapons primed, engines roaring. The invasion had been set. The time chosen. The council had spoken. Tomorrow they would begin the march upon Earth. Tomorrow the sky of the blue world would darken. Tomorrow they would attempt to break what could not be broken. The alien city roared with pride, songs of victory echoing across towers. Yet the human veteran stood still, his silence deeper than their noise, his presence heavy as a shadow before a storm. Far away among the fleets, the young officer, still restless, walked through the corridors of his ship, his thoughts chained to the human words. He wondered, could it be true? Could such a fragile race hold strength beyond what was seen? His doubts whispered, yet his training crushed them. Still he could not silence the unease in his heart. Back in the alien city, the veteran turned from the balcony, his eyes sharp, his body steady. He walked back into the shadows, ready for what was to come. He carried no weapon, no armor, no fleet. Yet he carried something far greater, the truth of what humanity was, the memory of every battle fought and every soul who refused to fall. He carried the storm within him. And though the aliens sang of victory, though their fleets filled the sky, though their arrogance burned bright, a shadow of doubt had been planted. And when the invasion began, that shadow would grow into a storm that even their endless steel could not withstand. The stage was set, the fleets were ready, Earth awaited, and the storm was coming. The dawn broke over Earth with skies clear and blue. Yet within minutes that peace was shattered as shadows spread across the heavens. Fleets of alien warships filled the horizon, their dark hulls burning against the rising sun. A storm of steel descending upon the planet below. The people of Earth looked upward in terror as the morning turned into night and sirens screamed across cities. Governments scrambled to respond. Presidents, generals, commanders, all called to action. Orders raced through satellites and bunkers. Soldiers poured into bases, civilians rushed into shelters, while the old veterans stood silent, their hearts steady, for they had seen storms like this before. They knew what it meant to be underestimated. They knew what it meant to fight when the sky itself seemed lost. The alien commanders on their bridges smiled, their voices cold with triumph, as they prepared the first wave. Their ships, aligned in flawless formation, weapons glowing with deadly energy, they broadcast across their networks, declaring the fall of Earth. The victory already decided, their arrogance heavy, as they gave the order, unleash the first strike. From orbit, beams of energy tore through the atmosphere, streaks of fire crashing into the surface with thunderous force. Explosions rippled across oceans, deserts, and mountains. Flames swallowed military outposts, communications towers collapsed, entire landscapes shook under the weight of alien power. Cities trembled, but Earth did not break. Instead, out of the flames came movement, soldiers rallying in streets, civilians forming chains of rescue, voices shouting with courage rather than fear. The alien commanders watched with curiosity, surprised at the speed of human response. They had expected chaos, they had expected collapse. Yet what they saw was order rising from destruction. They saw fire answered with resolve. And though they dismissed it as the last gasp of a fragile race's seed of unease began to grow deep in their minds. Far across the battlefield, in a ruined city, a group of young soldiers huddled behind the wreckage of collapsed buildings, their faces dirty, their eyes filled with fear. Yet their leader, a woman scarred by years of training, raised her voice steady. She said, "We do not surrender. We fight for every street, every stone, every soul." and her words burned into their hearts as they rose weapons ready, and the fight began with fury. The first clash between humans and aliens shook the ruins. Bullets cracked against armor, beams of energy cut through walls, yet the humans fought with cunning, using shadows, rubble, and smoke as weapons. They struck from alleys, from rooftops, from tunnels. They moved with the instinct of survival honed over generations. They were not polished like the aliens, not trained in perfect drills, but they were fierce, relentless, and every fallen comrade only sharpened their will. Above the skies, alien ships faced resistance more than they expected, for the skies of Earth were not empty. Missiles rose like arrows, piercing clouds. Fighter jets screamed through fire, weaving between blasts like hunters, their pilots driven not by arrogance, but by the desperate need to defend home. The first alien cruiser shuddered under a barrage of missiles, flames tearing across its hull. It spiraled downward, crashing into the sea, the ocean swallowing. Alien pride. Across the alien fleet, commanders frowned for the first time, their voices sharp with confusion. How could a world so primitive stand? How could machines so old strike blows upon their steel? Yet the truth was simple. Earth fought not with machines alone. Earth fought with spirit, and spirit cannot be measured on a screen. Deep within the alien council chamber, far from the battlefield, the human veteran, who had been silent for so long, sat among the shadows, his eyes closed, as if listening to the distant roar of war. His lips curved into the faintest of smiles, for he knew what was coming. He knew the first strike was only the beginning, that every blow against Earth would only awaken something greater. Back on the ground, entire cities turned into battleground. Civilians who once feared now carried supplies, ran messages, and aided the wounded. Children whispered prayers in the dark. Elders told stories of old wars, reminding the young that Earth had faced worse and still endured. And within every heart a flame grew brighter, stronger, unyielding. In the alien command ship, the Supreme Commander watched the screens with narrowed eyes, his voice deep with disdain. He declared, "This resistance is nothing more than delay. Crush them, burn every city, leave no stone unturned," and fleets obeyed, engines roaring as they descended closer, preparing to level entire regions. Yet, even as they descended, traps awaited. Hidden beneath mountains and oceans, ancient weapons of humanity awakened long, prepared though unknown to most. These weapons have been forged not in arrogance, but in fear that one day Earth would face an enemy from beyond. And now that fear had become salvation. Missiles long buried rose from silos, shields hidden beneath mountains flared to life, and the skies lit up with fire. Alien ships, once untouchable, were torn apart by storms of human steel. On the battlefield, a boy no older than 17 watched as the alien ships burned. He shouted with joy, tears in his eyes, though dust covered his face. Beside him, the scarred woman raised her rifle high, screaming, "We will never fall," and their voices carried through the ruins like thunder. The alien commanders raged, their pride wounded, their certainty shaken. They threw more ships, more soldiers, more fire. Yet for every street they claimed they lost 10 soldiers. For every ship that descended, 3 more burned in flames. They had never faced an enemy that turned every loss into strength, that turned every scar into a weapon. They did not understand that Earth was not simply a planet, it was a forge of warriors. The human veteran within the council chamber finally stood, his presence like a storm, his voice cutting through the silence. He spoke softly, yet every word carried power. He said, "They laugh at what they do not understand. They thought our scars made us weak. They thought our wars made us broken. But those scars are our strength. Those wars made us unyielding. You will see soon." And his eyes burned with fire. The aliens around him felt unease crawl through their skin. Night fell over Earth, yet the battle did not end. Fires burned across continents. Ships crashed into seas. The world shook under the weight of invasion. Yet in every shadow, humanity rose not as victims, but as warriors. And as the stars shone above through smoke and flame, the truth became clear. This war would not be won in hours or days. This war would become something far greater, something that would test the very soul of 2 civilizations. And in that moment, as the alien commander ordered the next strike, the human veteran whispered into the silence, "Let them come, let them see what it means to face Earth." The night sky blazed with fire as alien warships filled the heavens, their shadows stretching across continents like dark wings. and below, on the burning world of Earth, millions of people stood together, their hearts united in defiance, though fear gripped them. It did not rule them, because for every blast that fell, for every city torn apart, the will to fight grew sharper, stronger, brighter, like a storm that refused to die. The alien commanders barked orders from their towering ships, voices proud, yet restless, for what was once certainty now felt like sand slipping through their fingers. They had promised victory. Within hours they had trained for 100 years, their fleets built in secret, their weapons flawless, their drills perfect. Yet here they were locked in a war that refused to bow to their might. On the battlefield, cities turned to labyrinths of ruin and smoke. Humans fought not as one great army, but as countless small shadows spread across alleys, rooftops, and broken streets. The scarred woman who led her squad pressed her back to the crumbling wall, her breath heavy, her eyes blazing. She whispered to her soldiers, "We bleed, we break, but we rise again." And they nodded, weapons trembling, yet steady, hearts pounding but firm. The aliens surged forward, soldiers armored in steel, their weapons glowing with deadly light. They marched with precision through shattered streets. But precision was not enough, for the humans struck like ghosts from windows and sewers, from tunnels and collapsed bridges, striking, then vanishing, striking again, then vanishing once more. Every move was unpredictable, every strike fueled by rage and survival. High above, fighter jets of Earth screamed through burning skies, weaving between alien blasts like sparks in a storm. Their pilots, driven by desperation, not arrogance, every maneuver reckless, yet brilliant, missiles streaked upward, slicing through the night one after another, until the impossible happened. A second alien cruiser burst into flames, its burning carcass crashing into the ocean with a roar that shook both land and sea. In the alien command ship's silence fell. The Supreme Commander clenched his claws around the edge of his throne, his eyes narrowed, his pride wounded. And yet still he told himself it was only resistance, a minor delay. But deep within, the cracks of doubt spread like fire in dry grass. He wondered if they had underestimated the human race, if perhaps there was more to this world than chaos and scars. Far across the galaxy, the council chamber still echoed with the flickering images of Earth's history of war. The aliens, seated there, once amused, now shifted uneasily as the reports came in. For the human veteran who sat among them no longer seemed like a shadow. His presence now felt like a mountain, heavy and immovable. His eyes glowed with memory as he whispered, "You do not understand what kind of fire you have touched." Back on Earth, the resistance spread faster than the invaders could crush it. Towns that had fallen rose again, villages burned in the morning, but rebuilt by night. Roads destroyed were remade by the hands of thousands who refused to bow. Every act of defiance carried a message: this world will not break, this world will not kneel. In a hidden bunker deep beneath the mountains, leaders of Earth gathered around maps, their faces grim, but their voices steady. They argued, they planned, they fought among themselves. Yet beneath every word was unity, for the survival of the planet was larger than pride, larger than borders, larger than old wounds. They knew the only path forward was together, and that truth gave them strength. The scarred woman and her squad reached a ruined bridge at dawn. The river below, choked with fire and wreckage, alien patrols searched the banks, scanning for survivors. But the woman raised her hand and whispered, "Not today. We strike now." And with fire in their eyes, her soldiers obeyed. Explosions ripped through the patrol. Alien soldiers fell into the raging waters, and once again, Earth screamed back with defiance. But the aliens were not idle. Their fleets darkened the skies with reinforcements. Waves of soldiers poured onto the ground. Machines of war lumbered through forests and deserts. Their eyes red with fury, they unleashed fire upon entire regions, burning farmland, drowning mountains. In smoke the world shook and humanity bled, yet still humanity endured. The Supreme Commander of the alien fleet rose from his throne, fury radiating from him, his voice like thunder. He declared, "Crush them with everything we have, break their bones, scorch their ground, erase their hope." And so the fleets descended, engines roaring across the globe, with fire enough to drown the skies. But even as they came, traps awaited. From oceans rose submarines that had slept for decades, unleashing torpedoes into alien hulls. From mountains, hidden guns roared with defiance, tearing holes into ships thought invincible. From forests, resistance fighters ambushed with cunning and fire. Every part of Earth became a weapon, every inch of soil fought back. The The scarred woman fell to her knees beside the wreckage of a burning tank, her body broken, her arm bleeding, yet still she raised her rifle, still she shouted words that shook her squad. "We do not stop, not now, not ever." And her soldiers lifted their weapons, answering her call with voices raw with rage and courage. The alien commanders stared in disbelief. This was not war, as they knew it. This was something far more terrifying, a people who would rather burn with their world than surrender, a species who wore scars as armor, who turned despair into weapons, and every defeat into fuel. Their calculations could not measure such power. Their simulations could not predict such fire. The human veteran in the council chamber stood, his voice heavy as stone, his gaze locked upon the alien leaders who still tried to laugh though their voices shook. He spoke, "You see chaos, but I see memory. You see weakness, but I see strength. You see savages, but I see survivors, and survival is a weapon you can never master." On Earth, night fell once again, but the fires did not die, and neither did the people. Songs rose through shelters, prayers echoed in ruins. Children slept in arms of parents who swore to protect them with their last breath, and warriors bled into the soil, yet stood again, refusing to let darkness claim the dawn. The Supreme Commander clenched his fists as he stared upon the burning world below, anger and confusion twisting in his heart, and for the first time fear flickered in his eyes as he whispered, "What manner of race refuses to fall? What kind of world dares to defy us? After 100 years of preparation, what have we truly awakened?" And on the ground amid fire and rubble, the scarred woman whispered to her soldiers, "Hold fast, the storm has only begun, for Earth will never bow." And her words echoed through the night, carrying into every heart like thunder a promise that the war was far from over. The world burned, yet still it breathed. The skies torn open by fire, the oceans boiling with wreckage, the land scarred and bleeding. But through every wound a voice rose louder than thunder, and it was the voice of humanity, crying out that this was their home, and no invader, no matter how mighty, would take it from them. The alien fleets rained destruction without mercy, their commanders ordering relentless strikes, believing still that sheer force would shatter the stubborn will of the humans. Yet the harder they struck, the more the people fought back. Every family turned into watchful eyes, every ruined street became a battlefield, every cave and forest turned into a trap that swallowed the enemy whole. On a shattered plain lit by fire, the scarred woman led her squad again. Though her arm was wrapped in bandages and her body trembled with exhaustion, her voice did not falter. She whispered to her soldiers, "We are the storm, not them. We are the fire, not them." And together they rose from the dust, their weapons aimed, their hearts blazing with the promise that they would not kneel. The alien soldiers advanced, their armor gleaming with dark light, their weapons humming with deadly power, but their precision cracked for the first time. Hesitation touched them as ambushes erupted all around, from rubble, from trenches, from shattered vehicles. Humans struck with fury and vanished like smoke. The alien ranks staggered, their lines broken by resistance they had never trained for. High above the battle, the Supreme Commander stared at the world below, his face twisted with disbelief, his claws tightened on the armrest of his throne. For every city he crushed, 2 more rows. For every force he unleashed, another wave of humans struck back like lightning. His voice thundered across the command deck, "This planet should have fallen, this species should have died, and yet they refuse to break. What are we fighting against?" The council chamber light flickered as more reports came, and the alien leaders, watching from afar, leaned forward, unease carving through their proud faces. The human veteran stood silent, still in the shadows. But his silence was no longer small. It was heavy like iron. His eyes burned as he whispered, "Only 3 words they will endure," and those words carried more weight than the longest speech. In the mountains, resistance forces gathered with leaders, soldiers, civilians, even children, all huddled together. Maps spread across cold stone, their faces lit by the dim glow of lanterns. They did not speak of surrender. They spoke of fire. They spoke of survival. They spoke of home. The scarred woman stood before them, her voice rising over the noise. She declared, "They trained for 100 years to break us, but they do not understand us, because we have trained for thousands of years in something far greater. We have trained to survive." And the crowd answered with a roar that shook the cavern. The alien armies unleashed new machines, massive constructs of steel that walked like titans, their cannons tearing through the land, their footsteps crushing everything in their path. The Supreme Commander sent them forward, believing victory finally within his grasp. But the humans adapted once again, for rivers were diverted into valleys, drowning machines in floods, tunnels collapsed beneath their heavy feet, mines hidden in the soil tore their bodies apart. The earth itself fought alongside its children. On the coastlines where alien warships loomed above the seas, human submarines slithered through black waters, missiles streaked upward, and fire lit the skies. One ship after another fell screaming into the ocean waves, swallowing the giants, as if the planet itself had chosen to drag them down. The sea boiled, yet still the humans rose from beneath like shadows too deep to drown. Fear began to crawl through the alien ranks, whispers spreading among soldiers who once thought themselves invincible. They had never known an enemy that refused to yield, an enemy that turned every wound into strength. They began to fear the humans not for their weapons, but for their endless will. The scarred woman marched with her squad through burning ruins, their faces coated with ash, yet their eyes sharp as blades. When they saw a squad of alien soldiers, she raised her hand, her voice calm, steady, wait for my mark. She whispered then, at the perfect moment, they struck the ambush, swift, brutal, merciless. Her words echoed after the battle is done. Remember, we are still here, and that alone is victory. In the skies, alien fighters descended like flocks of steel, but human pilots rose to meet them, jets old and scarred, patched with desperate repairs, yet flying with courage unmatched. They soared through storms of plasma, weaving impossible paths, their missiles slashing through the dark like firebirds. Another alien fleet tore apart above Earth, their pieces burning as they fell. The Supreme Commander pounded his throne, fury blazing in his eyes. He shouted, "How can this be? How can they still stand?" And one of his advisors whispered, trembling, "Perhaps, Commander, perhaps we chose the wrong enemy." In the council chamber across the galaxy, the alien leaders leaned back in their seats, sweat beading on their foreheads. Their laughter silenced their pride, shattered. The human veteran finally stepped forward, his face carved with scars, his eyes burning with memory, his voice calm, yet sharp as steel. "You looked at our history and saw chaos, but you were blind. You saw weakness where there was strength. You saw division where there was unity. You saw savages where there were survivors. You made the greatest mistake. You thought humans could be conquered." On Earth, night fell once again, yet the fires glowed brighter than stars. The songs of survivors rose through the ruins, echoing through the broken cities. Prayers carried on the wind. Children slept against the chest of parents who whispered promises that they would never be abandoned. Soldiers leaned on one another, bleeding, yet smiling, because they still breathed, and breathing meant fighting. The scarred woman raised her eyes to the burning sky, whispering softly but firmly, "Let them come, let them burn us, let them bleed us. For every wound we will rise again, for every death we will rise stronger. This world is not theirs, it is ours." And her words carried across the winds, through every camp, every trench, every broken street, until it became a promise. The Supreme Commander stood silent on his ship, his chest heavy with doubt, his voice a whisper none could hear. What have we awakened? What fury have we called upon? And for the first time he looked down upon Earth, not with arrogance, not with certainty, but with fear. And so the war raged on, but now the lines had shifted. The invaders no longer hunted with certainty. Now they fought with hesitation, while the humans fought with fire. And though the world bled, though the skies burned, though the soil shook, one truth had carved itself into the heart of the universe: Earth would not kneel.